interesting work that needs to be done in sort of moving beyond that. So I think that it's degrowth, yes, but I think it's also degrowth and what else do we need to do? And this is sort of going back to some of these fundamental relationships that are actually broken in the current system. And it's not just the economy that's driving that. It's largely, it's our governance systems. It's sort of the narratives, the aspirations that we tell ourselves. And this is linked, as Jason sort of outlines in his book really, really well, to sort of a colonialization or an objectification of nature purely for how it can be useful to us. And so I think that there's some interesting we really need to get the core of what are the narratives we're telling ourselves that can help us think about a transformed future. Because right now, sort of we talk about the need to meet the SDGs. We've got a 2050 agenda sort of being negotiated for the Convention on Biological Diversity. And so we can agree on the need to change, that the current pathway we're on is unsustainable. But what kind of future we're actually trying to look towards, what that looks like, sort of what are the relational configurations that we need to sort of generate at a planetary level, is still sort of up for grabs. And in particular, the pathways of then how we're supposed to get there is a really, is sort of really big gap in the conversations that we're having at the moment. And sort of a lot of the work that we've been doing on the task force for scenarios and models at IPBES is really thinking about understanding a plurality of approaches that are really important to understand. So I don't necessarily have a similar conception of what a more sustainable or a more sort of thrivable future is. It might be very different to you, Rosalind, but both of us are entitled to these different sort of perceptions. And until we actually understand that there's a plurality of relationships and that with that diversity, we've actually sort of undermined a lot of the worldviews, of the perspectives, and particularly people from the global south, particularly indigenous and local sort of knowledge holders who tend to be marginalized within sort of the current configuration, that we need to bring those stories and those ways of being a lot more strongly to the fore so that we're able to actually understand the full diversity or the plethora. I think degrowth is a very important component of that, but I think it's sort of one important emphasis from an economic perspective, but there are also a lot of other key sort of leverage points that we need to attack within the sort of global Earth system if we're really going to move towards a more sustainable planet. And finally, just on the note of biodiversity conservation, I think it would be interesting at some point maybe to unpack this idea of conservation in and of itself, which sort of has its own colonial legacy and history of sort of keeping nature separate out there, sort of in the form of national parks, for example, which has excluded a lot of people from their ability to access nature. And I think that the way that we talk about nature and society, and again, sort of Jason talks about this in his book, these relational components is something that we need to be very careful of in the language that we use when we talk about biodiversity.